And this will just set the context for Med first, and then we will get into talking about it.
Sure.
I don't think there's any audio here, so Heidi, if there's anything you want to voice over, you feel free.
Sure. Just to say hi, everybody. Heidi Holder from the Met, and you are looking at the 81st Street Studio, our new interactive play space that turns 1 year old on Monday coming. So this is really a great and opportune time. So you're really seeing, young people interacting with all the various stations, learning about materiality in all its various forms. What you're seeing here is we think of light as a material, playing together, doing things that are both analog and digital, or making things in an analog way and interacting with it digitally, and just plain old play and discovery at your own pace. And sometimes you discover things in the space, and sometimes you don't until maybe you attend to this, and that's okay too. So, a new space for the Met that really is enjoyable. About almost, I think, 200,000 visitors in the last year, of little kids and their parents and their play dates.
I love it. So Heidi, you and I we were having a fantastic conversation before this. So maybe we'll kind of we'll go over some of the things that we talked about. But why don't we just starting off? Can you tell us like a little bit about your kind of journey, your career? Like, how did you end up at the Met?
We're gonna end up at the Met. I once heard someone talk about where they sit. I see that. So I'm a person who sits somewhere between education, art, product, content, that kind of thing. I'm a person I'm from Trinidad and Tobago, which is very significant because it is a multi-ethnic place and very artistic place, lots of artistic production for such a tiny place of 1.3 million people. So I'm sort of brought up in this milieu of many languages, many cultures, Hinduism, Islam, Baha'i, you name it. And people are very much secular religious people in my part of the world. So I come from museums and I also come from I'd say higher ed, working in science education, working in the Museum for African Art. I worked at the Queen's Museum. So it's an interesting journey. And along the way, I have made or created products or things that are meant to help users gain an understanding of something or experience something or engage in some way, I would say. So, and in terms of academics, so if you wanted to know that I have a PhD in education, and I focus on how do you have a big idea and you trickle it down so everyone would do it. So I studied bureaucracies because I learned that that's how things actually get done, to tell you the truth. So I was very interested in how can you make a system shift and change to help you do something. So, and my first love and the way I came to this country to be an oil painter. So I have a very interesting background, starting growing up in science in Trinidad and Tobago, physics, math, and chemistry, Cambridge A-level exams and all that good stuff. And then always liked art, and I defied my father and said I was going to go do art. And I was a painter for a number of years and switched to art history again, Flemish painting. So I have lots of backgrounds and things that drove me and my parents crazy for a very long time. So art and calligraphy and making and all that stuff coming together, but all the while working in institutions and finding a way to connect to people. So I would say, in the end, an artist who is interested in solving problems that affect people and how they interact with things and how they learn, if that's helpful.
No, there's like so many threads that we can chase down there.
Yeah.
I want to have this conversation about institutions because we had a really interesting conversation about institutions leading up to this. But I want to talk a little bit about like how did the idea for Med first come to be? Like why did anyone think that? I mean, how were you able to convince the institution that they needed this, or like did they know that they needed this?
Well, that's a good question. When I got here, the idea in play was that the Met wanted to create a children's space. So this was Matt Holein's idea. So when I got here, the idea of a children's space was in play already, and the idea of having it funded, the funds were already there, which takes a load off. And my role at that time was I need an idea. What will this space be about? Which of course is a cringe and scary moment because I literally just landed. I came in October and I'm being asked this like the next day I get here. I discovered that there's this thing that's at play. So my sort of approach, I noticed very quickly that they were having lots of discussions, and that the institution itself is very powerful conceptually. The Met is a concept, if you have to think of it as like theoretical framework. It's that powerful. It's more than 150 years old. in those days. And I noticed that people kept talking within the framework of the mat, meaning naming things that are in the mat already, using the same terms that we use. And I thought to myself, wow, how can I sort of do this? So I sort of thought of the whole institution as a landscape and wondered, or as a universe, and there is a black hole. And if you had to choose what galaxy you will fill it with, that will be this space. So whatever it is, it shouldn't replicate another planet in the system. If you're just thinking about how things go, it shouldn't replicate another environment. It shouldn't be called the same thing. And I was, trying to cope with the pandemic. So I was reading all my other books, the Quran and the I Ching and the whatever, trying to see if I could make sense of the world. And one thing we talked earlier about the I Ching, this idea about naming a thing. When you name a thing, you begin to sort of treat it the way you've christened it. So I asked that we stop calling it anything and call it the thing. And that was the name of the project. It had no name. And I just did a poll of people, what do we not do at the museum? And I also kept thinking about what was fundamental to us, that what part of it that we can really uplift for young people. And it turned out that people felt we did not allow people to come and interact with us. We didn't allow people to speak back to us. We couldn't play or make noise or touch things, and you couldn't be brave. You couldn't take risks. Because we are a very structured place. Institutions like ours are structured. That's how we live this long. We hold on to materials. We take care of them. We're very careful. So I felt the things had to do this stuff. You had to be teleported, transported. And for me, I noticed that I have a science background and an art background as a maker and as a person who was, doing science and stuff. So the institution also did this. So in many ways, I felt it was a place to bring together things. Whereas we had many departments, how can we bring together many departments? In this case, art, science, conservation, and how can we do a lot of the things that people in the institution who work, they say we don't let you do. So this is where this idea of materiality came up. And it was basically, I talked to my boss, I showed it to her, and she's like, you're going to have a one-on-one with Max, and you're going to show him this idea in a closed Zoom meeting. And we sat and we did that, and he was like, I love it. And that's where we went. And it was just a question of really a lot of diplomacy and talking to people and getting people to come along and involving lots of people. That was it too. So as much as it's an education space, it's super important. It was many people's space. Many people saw themselves, and the scientists were really happy. Oh, you're going to talk about science. You're going to talk to us. You're going to use this material. The art historians were like, oh my God, you're going to refer back to objects in the catalog. You're going to, you know what I mean? So just really, and then we had architects and visitor services. So lots of people were involved. You know what I mean? So why somebody's talking about the naming, that was actually done after. We named it long after it was created. Just before we launched it. It actually happened after. So you birth the child and then you name it like you normally do.
That's great.
It's
the
not
proper order of things. You got to see it. You have to see it.
You gotta
what
see
is
it.
This thing?
Yeah, he might not look like a Wendell, so.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
No, and it's so interesting because, in some ways what you're talking about is a creative act, but it's also an act of like really navigating a bureaucracy. And like I started my career in-house at the Smithsonian American Art Museum. And it's like very hard to be disruptive in a place like that because I mean people work their whole lives to get a job at the Met. It's like it's like if you get into Harvard, like the last thing you want to do is get kicked out. Like it just looks real bad, So it's like how did you go around about that process of making of sort of unentrenching people or making them feel like they had some ownership in the vision for this?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing. I mean, I say this and people joke, the Met was not in my plan of a place to do. I was interviewing in lots of different places at that time. It turned out that they were going in the same direction that I was going. Literally, if you had to think of it as a visual, I was like literally like, trying to like thumb my way to another place. And it turned out they were going to cross on I-95 and I was going to go there too. So in my interview, I talked to, the people asked questions, and those are the same things I was thinking about, being interdisciplinary, being, taking risks and bring it. So it was a good fit in that way. And frankly, I think one thing that the pandemic, this was peak pandemic time. I got hired in the middle of the pandemic, so it was all online. So what we did for a while was, I think in some ways it almost detached people from the space. I'm thinking about that, in hindsight. So, you can sometimes see things either better or worse in hindsight. So in a life, you think of it in the pandemic, it's as if all the gravity was let out of the room, so everything was floating and everything weighed nothing now. So you could move it around. The weight lessens, if you think about it in a physics way. So it was, in a lot of ways, people knew that something had to change overall, not just in this case. So in that way, and then also just talking to people. And I have a varied background, so not being able to speak many languages, not French and English, but to the scientist, to the physicist, to the chemist, to the art historian, to the do we involve children in the creation? Absolutely, tons and tons of that. So yeah, so I think a lot of it was talking to people, and because we didn't physically have to go to places, I could meet people on Zoom and just feel them out and involve them. So people were very sometimes surprised to be invited. I would like you to be in a little, like a brainstorm with like Post-its and Doritos, you know what I mean, and things like that. And some people were not, so it was just having us all be in the same space. And of course, importantly, thank them very much. And Brett would tell you, we had a gratitude party before it opened for everyone who was involved, which was a big party with more than 100 and something people.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
So the way I want to do it, I'm going to probably, so Heidi and I are going to like kind of talk for like the first half hour or so, and then I'm going to like open it up totally to all the questions. So, this is just like me being selfish. I think one of the things that I think is actually really remarkable about the space is that it's like loud. And it's chaotic, and there's people moving around, and there's people talking to each other. And it's like, if there's like a set of rules and and norms of that space, it's very, very different than the norms of the Met.
Yes.
So like, I'm wondering how you arrived there, or how you were able to cultivate that.
Well, it was, Max was on board, which is one thing. And this notion of play, because the Met does not allow you to play in other places. And it was really important because it's the pedagogy itself is very quite sure. This notion of constructivist, where you create your own knowledge, or inquiry based, or places where you can make mistakes and there are no dead ends. So that just opens it up. And with talking to the architect, just even the setup of the space, if you go in, there are many paths. It's like the yellow brick road. There are many of them as you come in, and things are circular in shape. They did a lot of research on what is inviting, what makes a playground inviting. So this notion of play was something else. And really, not everyone was on board necessarily, but people were involved.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, and I would say even Blue Cadet, hosting some of the workshops where we had people from across the museum. So in many ways, people were involved. You know what I mean? It's like I contributed in some way. So that was really important. And then, there are lots of books on what it means to sort of work with people or make you a good leader or a colleague, but in the end, people just have to kind of like you. They're not too bad. You know what I mean? You're not an a-hole. So that was a big part of it. Do not be an a-hole. You're gonna do things like this here, and just inviting people, being inviting, and saying this is our space, and treating it that way. And of course, there's some annoying things about maybe my own personality about making sure that we were conceptually clear, because I felt that was my job. So what in the end, what I shared with Max, he had a whole PowerPoint of how we got to this idea, and then made this idea into a sentence that we could refer back to. A long sentence with a ton of commas, but a very clear idea about what this is, so that I can pull it up whenever people are deviating from this and they're not doing that, to remind them what that is. So something could be near enough, and most people may have gone with it, but I wouldn't go with it. Again, might be a very annoying thing, but that's how we ended up where we did. And also being clear about the age group, not wanting to do too much. Once you focus, ages 3 to 11, that gives you an area of focus. And it doesn't mean that you couldn't have people older than that or people younger than that or with other interests go in. But if you focus, the idea will be very well established as people who make ideas and make things go. Yeah.
Okay. All right. You know what? I'm not going to be that
You
selfish.
seen some
But
questions?
I'm gonna pull some questions. I'll pull some questions. Let's actually talk about let's talk about this idea of co-creation. I think that's like super important, because it sounds like there's co-creation in the organization itself. You're working with all these different departments. You're obviously working with partners like Blue Cadet and Coco, and then like you're also working with like the community and like the audience, and and the intended audience is children, but also parents. Like how did at what point did you pull them into the conversation or
That's a
into
good
the
question.
process?
So of course, the idea is a sentence, and what does that mean in terms of the different stations, what that would look like? So initially, constant conversation between all our internal partners, of course, in terms of generating ideas, etc. And then there was the work with Blue Cadet as well as the architects, and then bringing in children to try these things out and see what works and what doesn't work, or how we get there. And we had children of staff members or children of Blue Cadet staff coming in because, of course, just to
We've a
let you
lot
all
of
know,
we produce a lot of children at Blue
a
Cadet.
lot of children. And
Yeah.
I mean, this is the pandemic, so children were not in great supply
Yeah.
walking around loosely at this time. So, and then, of course, there were also advisory committees of people that we talked to in terms of what, from the DOE. And I came in and I immediately I asked, because the advisory committee where they met. So the advisory committee was so high up, like the creme de la creme of education, which is wonderful. But I just want some creme de la elementary school teachers.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Can I get some, what I mean? Creme de la, mom who takes kids to park once a week, like folk. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So just even like changing the makeup, like, can we just bring in some people who work with kids? They don't, and that's their special. They're the creme de la creme, because they are some of our users and people interested. So there was a lot of user testing, lots of working with students, asking them, interviewing them, asking them what they thought. There's like, what do you think of this? And using that to shape what we did in a lot of ways. And again, lots of hands. From and even the architect and the way in which we work, which we talked about process, which at the time I didn't think anything of it because it just seemed to work. But thinking of each iteration or each manifestation of part of it as a proposal, not a solution. So that way you give it time to play. So even constructivists in our own methodology, and often, so it's not a waterfall at all. It's concentric circles that overlap in different ways. And it may have been frustrating for some people to be like, you said you wanted this and we gave you this thing, and I'm like, it's nearly there, let's move it along. And asking that, nicely, let's shift it a little because it doesn't work with the concept. It is saying or doing, is trying to do something else. And I was very aware, it's like making a garment. Like, you put some piping on the edges of some sleeves and it doesn't work because it doesn't work with the garment. It's too heavy. It's not, the garment isn't saying this. So how do you think of this as a thing that's very conceptually pure and each part makes sense to it, which is, I can't tell you how, but it's, I guess, instinct and paying attention to it. It's like, I don't know how to explain it, but that this thing doesn't work with it, or this thing does work.
It's so fun. I was having a conversation yesterday about Rick Rubin. Do you know Rick Rubin, the music producer?
I do
Oh,
not.
oh, he's fantastic. He was like one of the early hip hop producers, and then he did like the Beastie Boys. He's and now he's like looks like a guru. He's got like a giant beard. And if I ever get like wealthy enough that like I'm just gonna totally rock the Rick Rubin look. Like the guy he gets zero. He's been involved in like helping shape these like very, very like instrumental artists, these like amazing, amazing bands. But a lot of it is just providing that direction. So it's like, you can have this chaos, but someone needs to have that true north and just be like,
Yes.
and that focus. You kind of teased us a little bit. Yeah, The Creative Act is an amazing book. Listen to it, and then he reads it, which is lovely. But yeah, what was the guiding sentence? What was the sentence? Do you remember it?
Can I find it?
Oh no, yeah, I know. I'm sure it's been a year. It's been a
The
year.
81st is in a year. The 81st Studios,
Yeah.
I think it's at the 81st Studios, an interactive play space for children ages 3 to 11 who, with a focus on materiality. And I think we said something about they should be able to, engage in critical thinking and play and finding, and should be interactive and uses that is both digital and analog. So everything in all the words that it had to be was in this sentence. I think that's just about it. The 84, yeah. So
Yeah.
the age group: digital, analog, interactive, play, constructivist, and meant to. I didn't even use words like inspire. I'm always nervous about using words that people use a lot because then everybody comes if these words get baggage. And
Yeah,
they,
totally.
I mean, it's, so that was really just one sentence on a slide that we would, they say roll the tape, just pull it up whenever we seem to be straying from the scripture. We go back to that and we say, this is really this is not what we're doing if we're doing this kind of thing.
I mean, it's such a delicate balance, like making people feel heard and included, and like that you're talking to someone and they feel like, okay, their vision or their content or their mission is being built into this thing,
Yeah.
but like also like not just making it like a complete mishmash
Yeah.
of, like where like, you lose the focus. So it's like
Yeah.
it seems like it's a really instrumental, I think, in some ways,
Certainly.
very
Certainly.
good
It's
balance.
super, super important. I mean, I'm not just, this is not just a studio, this is really how I work overall. And a lot of what you see in the studio, just to talk about my sort of regular job, is that interactive is very loaded, and it's very buzzy.
Yeah.
But it was a hands-on play space. So a lot of what you see in the studio exists within the museum and the department as well. So because it also had to fit in the Met as well. It had to fit within the institution itself as well, but not replicate. I'm always important. Don't replicate something you already have.
Mhm.
Did you see anything similar to the 81st Studio being created? I don't think so. Someone told us in a meeting, we were at was it SEGD, and someone said that that's the benchmark. If you wanna, and we have visitors all the time from all over the world. I think our top 5 are Japan, Korea, Germany, the UK, and the Middle East, of people who want to build children's spaces.
I mean, I would say probably the closest thing. Well, it's actually interesting. I think the Exploratorium does a fair amount of this, but I think there's a big difference, which is that like the Exploratorium, like which I love, and I love the people that work there, and I'm actually going to have Tom Rockwell, the Chief Creative Officer, come speak in 2025. But like what I really love about a lot of the experiences at Met 81st is that they're all like collaborative experiences.
Yes.
There's not like a there you have people, you see people operating in groups, like even if it's like reading together, like the reading
Yeah.
nooks, like there's a lot in the architecture, there's a lot in the experiences that encourage people to talk to one another and learn from one another.
Certainly, certainly. I mean, we just sent out our, so I said we're 1 year anniversary, and we sent out our invitation to people to come in very low key, have a glass of something and a chocolate or something. And one part of it was the notice over the years that there's so many play dates. People have 1 or 2 children and they meet other children and they meet adults, and they sort of get together at the studio. So that's been very interesting. And children who come alone play together because you have no choice, or you just come there. And children, I believe they want to do that. I really do believe children do want to do that. Just as how they don't need to be told what to do to play. You should give them some blocks and some things, or show them whatever. Then they will start just turning the dials. They just will start doing it. So it's very much built that way. And even the architects, those circular shapes are done, things curve, you know what I mean? So you're always facing other people, whether you're facing a child or facing a group of people. You're never sort of alone in that space in a lot of ways. So please come and play. I mean, and we talked before too about what it does to, it's a catalyst in a lot of ways. I mean, we have storytelling as a tradition at the Met, so there's lots of spaces and nooks for you to tell stories. It's just set up that way. And then we talked a bit about socially what this place means for us. Again, it's wonderful and amazing, but it should not be a jewel that you polish and you put into a case and you have to pay money to come see it. It's a play space, so we've expanded it a lot. I would like to. There are other programs that I do that are connected to social service in New York City landscape. And as we talked before, we've piloted a program with Good Plus Foundation where we have fathers with weekend custody of their kids come in and position the 81st Studio. So we give them like basically special time in the 81st Studio. So when they are with their kid on a weekend, this is the place that you can bring your kid. It's fully accessible. It's got seats if your kid's on the spectrum. It's got spaces. It's got quiet spaces. It's got ticks all those boxes, safe, everything, and it is free and open to you. So I want to do more of that. We have an artist, Petri Talila, who is a Kosovoan artist who uses children's drawings to make sculpture. Right now, he has a rooftop commission on the Met, and he came to the studio and played because he didn't know we had a children's space. And Petri came, he played around there, and he actually put a piece of artwork in the studio because of our concept in the studio of what we call the word is gone from me now, but where you can there are lots of things in the studio where we don't tell you it's there. So it's like a surprise, like a light that will turn on or a noise will happen. What you call hidden, the word is completely gone from me. I don't know.
Subtle magic.
Subtle magic. So kids would see it at their level, and some things will never be seen by some people, which is hard for people to accept, that if you make something, you should let people know it's there, and maybe they don't. So Pretreat contributed some subtle magic to the thing. You either see it or you don't see it. It's sculpture because it fits into the space. And he is going to be having a talk for adults. So we're going to have an artist talk for adults in the space because of that. So just really, how can you really like use the space and have people find ways to connect to it in there? And it allows us to do that stuff a lot.
So there's some like great questions pouring in, but I'm gonna jump in on mine. So like, I mean, one, I just want to like take a moment to talk to just stop at that Good Plus Foundation example, because I just think that's so powerful that you guys are partnering with an organization that helps dads who have custody on the weekend play with their kids. And I think that's so profound, because I think a lot of these play centers, they're very geared around like, oh, it's for 3 to 8 year olds, and it's like often like 3 to 8 year olds don't like really need a lot of, like, you can give them a cardboard box and whatever, and they're pretty good playing. But like, I think parents often have a hard time knowing how to play with their kids, how to talk with their kids. And like, I think that's just such a powerful amenity to offer, and like such a like for free. I mean, that's like such, yeah. I mean, it's so generous, in a lot of ways. I love the spirit.
Appreciate that you saying that. I mean, and the notion of play too, because I go to the studio sometimes, and adults have their idea of what play is. Many people think it's supposed to be like play is finite or it's a right answer. And I do think in the future for the studio, maybe even workshops and things with parents about how to do constructive play with children, and patience during play. And we have been sort of toying with this idea, but really bringing it as part of the landscape of the city much more. And again, a lot of this mirrors things that are happening also on the work that I do. I work with older adults. We send a box of art materials, not just art, but art making, stuff to eat, again, multidisciplinary, multisensory, things to smell and stuff like that. And we send it to 75 older adult centers through the New York City Aging once a month. And maybe I'm totally not hip anymore, because they created an Instagram first.
I love it.
With yes. I was like, oh my God, and put it to music when they have their sessions with these materials. So I'm just saying the studio in a lot of ways is a microcosm of other things too. It's like a catalyst for other things. So you see what's happening for this age group happening. So we do have a music program at the Met in education now. We also have a very robust STEAM program. So just, so what's their IG? I can tell you, I started following them. I was like, oh my God, and I realized I'm the one who's old.
Oh, I'll send it out to everybody.
Oh, you send it? Okay.
You send it to me, I'll send it out to everybody. Well, I'll send it in a follow-up. But I think it's so fascinating, because like really what you're providing is a real amenity. And I think that museums, they're very interested often in like engaging new audiences. And a lot of times that ends up happening through, or like it happens through like marketing. So they like put up signs in a bus shelter in other neighborhoods, but like what they're not doing is necessarily providing something that's of like true value to that community. And I think that's really interesting.
So certainly, that's a very interesting thing that you say. The studio itself is asking you to come to us, and we also, as part of my team, we do a lot of and these are buzzwords, so forgive me. These words are loaded, like they weigh like 10 tons each: community and engagement. I don't know which one is heavier, right? So, but what it means, it means that we are going, not just inviting, but we go there, and going to spaces out into the boroughs, wherever, Harlem, the Bronx, other parts of Manhattan, and doing workshops or activities on site in other places, or co-creating things with people, or something very small, as in inviting people who maybe the heads or point people in some organizations, and giving them the royal treatment. Come here for breakfast and see an exhibition privately, or come here and take over the studio. It's yours for the afternoon, or invite a family or hold a family night for a certain district and open the studio up after hours, and have people come in and you play. You know what I mean? So there's a lot that happens. Again, not the jewel, not something you shine, but really it should be a usable space. And in the future for the studio for me is, of course, at some point we switch out those because it's meant to change, and we have another, because it's materiality, so we have another focus material, and then think about what can we do in terms of, Department of Health and Human Services, in terms of child care within the city, and what's possible with those organizations and having places more good, like what we did for Good Plus, to have that kind of to be of use to others.
Okay, great. I'm going to let some people from the community actually ask their own questions if they like. So just scrolling up, I think Rachel had asked what your plans for ongoing changes. I think we kind of touched on that.
Yeah.
Iko, I'm sorry. Do you want to ask your question? You want me to ask for you?
Well, I'm interested, like, when we're talking about like things that are so buzzy as interactive and play, right?
Yeah.
How that was connected to like, learning through doing, what were like, if you had like a structured set of like learning goals, or and I don't know what's the other thing I see, like learning goals, and well, that kind of a structure, how it connected to like the collection, to like the classic things you do, the classic heavyweights, and like, your little suitcase that you always have to bring with you being at the Met.
Certainly. I don't know. I kind of threw away the suitcase. I don't. So because the focus, so the sort of theme for the space, if I had to pick a word, was materiality, which is very broad. Because to me, that's what we deal in as an institution like us. We deal in materials, and we deal with the care of materials in the end, whether it's an oil painting or Edo period piece of pottery or something like that. So I felt as though we did look at the school curriculum and to say, well, what are some of the things that we can attempt to teach, that the space you can learn in the space yourself rather than needing an instructor to teach you. So we looked at various things. We looked at the school curriculum in science education. We looked at, and we took it a little further. So we also looked at the optics curriculum in physics, because I think, I know without light, we cannot experience art or things or anything. You know what I mean? So, and again, Jeff and I were talking earlier today that even when an artist makes a painting, the space is staffed, and it's one of the craziest jobs ever. So we thought of the curriculum and also how to have fun at the same time. So it involved, and there were a couple of things. So the new suitcase there's the curriculum, yes, that kids are going to do. We're going to look at the optics curriculum because we have to talk about light and find a playful way to do it. It was in the pandemic, and when I first came, it was all digital, and I felt it would be an interesting thing to mix the digital and the analog, because I do believe digital should be a tool, like a hammer. So if you don't have a nail, don't use it. Use something else, right? So that was also very important, that it should be a tool. If it's for digital's sake, it's like a stone in my shoe. I could feel it. It's uncomfortable. Let's not do that. And then also, whenever we gave examples or we needed to talk about objects or materials, we tried to use material. We use everything that is in our collection. So you have one opportunity to experience here, and you can go and you can see it there. We also have lots of touch spaces. So as you walk into the space, when you come visit, you will see the key material for this first space is wood. So wood in all of its form, including old petrified wood or burnt wood that they use like in Japanese housing. And you can touch that. You can roll on it. You can, you know what I mean? We also have things that to do with scent. So it comes like you're really experiencing kinetically with your body, and you can build with it in another space if that's what you wanted to do. Yeah. And you could, if you wanted to flip through like a game and learn about wood, but in a scientific way, as in wood as what is the molecular structure like? If you can figure it out, even if you can read or if you cannot read. So there are images for those who cannot read and can see what's happening, and maybe they do not get it. My most important thing that I wanted to do was to tell the truth and give the real knowledge. Do not water it down, because I have seen it where we water the optics down in a way or say something that's not quite true because we're trying to reach children. I would rather that we say the right thing or do the right thing, and they don't understand at first, and eventually they will understand. But you tell the truth from the beginning. I hope that is helpful. And of course, a constructivist lens, this idea of where you create knowledge And as you know, constructivism comes out of this notion of chaos, where things move in different directions, and eventually there is a bifurcation in a particular direction, which is where learning begins to take place as things begin to solidify and you begin to see processes or see patterns, if that's helpful. And of course, inquiry-based learning. That's helpful.
Oh, I love it. I want to stop. There are so many things there. I want to just like pull one thing out. So we had the sort of the tree structure that allows people to make like their own scratch boards and then create the drum. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting was that these scratch boards, they're like kind of like it's just like these little pieces of wood with like the black whatever, and they're scratching and they're making it, and then there's some like interactive digital stuff. But like I saw kids like being like really shocked that they could take it home with them. And again, I think there was like this idea of one, giving them space to create something a little bit different and new, and then like also that generosity of giving something,
Yeah. I mean, that was very interesting because at first we had a whole pile of them because people thought that you couldn't take them home, so we had to like literally market that this is yours, you can take it home. So so that's shifted a little bit, but I think sometimes kids choose to donate theirs as choose to donate it and for other kids to see an example. But once a child sees something once, they're much faster than we are. Someone asked about staffing and running the place. It is fully staffed. We have 3 full-time people there, and we have about 90 volunteers and about 10 what we call contract educators. So it does take a lot of people to staff the space, and of course, absolutely very good relationships with the custodial staff and security and visitor services, and so it's a lot of people it takes. We see about 700 people per day. On a weekend, it could be 1,000. On a good weekend, 1,200 per day. So it's a lot of people coming through that space. Visitor favorites. We're checking that out now. I've got a survey going. We got a survey going.
Let's say, George, do you want to ask your question?
Hi. Sure. Yeah, well, the question is, I can imagine your ask, is this successful? I mean, and how do you measure that? But I feel like, personally, I feel like so much of what matters is not measurable. But so I'm wondering how you respond to that question when you get it from, no doubt, the higher ups.
That's a very good question. So there are a couple of things. The biggest question, I guess, like, when are you going to test to see how kids are? Well, and I always have to say, as a professional, I cannot just test people's children as very easily. So at the moment, I think it's numbers, and we're looking at demographic information. So some of the things were how diverse is the population visiting the space. So those are some of the higher up questions too. So at the moment, we are looking, I do interpretive research in this department also. So we have a team that's collecting data, and we're looking to collect a sample that is kind of like equal to a typical day, which is about 670 to 700. And it's basically information, things about like the languages spoken, what are people doing, and what things did your child choose first. I am interested in a broader study in terms of like issues of play, and we have done some of that kind of work here about, talking about interactivity and looking at some of the goals of the space and if that is met. But that's a bigger study. I would definitely, and I think I may partner with the American Museum of Natural History, and we would have to work way more involved because the participants are below the age of 10. So that's really just a thing. But we're just collecting data to figure out. They know the numbers because there's a counter that checks how many people coming into the space on a daily basis. So people are happy with the numbers, and I think the next step again is how can we make this space be used by different people in all kinds of ways, and ways that we have not even thought of, if that's helpful.
I love it. Jose Antonio, do you want to ask your question? I can ask a question. Are you guys thinking about incorporating AI in the space in some way? And maybe this comes down to the conversation around technology. And you talked about it being a hammer, but as you sort of see sort of new affordances and new things you can do, like what's exciting to you, and and then also what feels like a complete complete distraction.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, we're working on other projects now where I'm very much thinking about how can AI be there again in a way that's needed, that makes sense, not for its own sake. It's about learning, and you'll probably hear about that in another year or so. But I think when the space is there's a new material, new focus material, and the other things change, I think it would just definitely have to go with what makes sense for the space at the time. I mean, I'm very excited about the stuff that's happened for Spotify, that kind of stuff, where you can sort of, that's not what you like? Okay, I got you. I'm gonna, this sort of like conversational kind of view, or something again that allows people to form community around learning or things that they want to learn. So it's like a kind of like a theme with me. I'm from a very big family, so
Yeah.
anything that sort of allows you to bring people together, because I think sometimes, and maybe, who am I to sort of even combat this, but often I think some technologies, the tools we use that are digital, allow us to do things solo, but not really with other people in a way. So anything that would allow us to do that and have learning be perhaps intuitive, or be the way that a classroom operates, where you are able to, because it operates that way now, where you begin as an initial inquiry because you want to know what do people know first, and then you want to go with their interest or figure out what they brought to the room with them, what knowledge did they bring, and how can you build on that and take them someplace I didn't expect, like, you know what I mean, the way that you would do with a good teacher, whereas yourself. So how can the AI do something like that? But it would depend. Whatever, it just has to make sense.
Yeah, no, I love the fact that you actually mentioned Spotify, because we're actually doing a big project right now for the National Gallery of Art, and we're using AI for collection search, but a bunch of the APIs and a bunch of the AI that we're using are Spotify, like the Spotify nearest neighbor. Like a lot of these things are sort of like open source and available to use.
Yeah.
And I think it's really, that I think you talked a little bit about sort of like looking at other places, and we talked about this a little bit about Trinidad and Tobago, but going to other people's religious ceremonies, that you just are necessarily like you're not just looking within other museums for inspiration. You're not you're looking at something that maybe other people wouldn't necessarily associate as a place for inspiration.
Yeah, I see that. I mean it was tough at the time because every place was closed.
Yeah.
but we looked at other children's spaces in the museums, but then also I feel, you can look around, but you also kind of have to look inward too. I have my theory is that often it's like, maybe it's, you need my therapist to say this to me, but whatever you need, you have, but you have to figure out how to put together. So this space for me, and I think many people agree, is an expression of the Met itself, because it has to make sense in the end. It's like a very good story, a good narrative. When it ends, you're like, I kind of knew that was going to happen. Like you kind of like, it doesn't feel like it rubbed you the wrong way because the character, something happened. But this space really is a lot of what we are, just expressed in a way now in 2023 at that time. So I think it is like that. It comes really from the space. We looked at other spaces, but it is all the things there we do here. Musical instruments, materials, wood, science, optics, experimenting, all the materials, all the scientific research, the conservation, the building of things, the making of things. All the Met does that already. So this space is many ways a manifest. If the Met had a baby in 2023, it would be this space. So you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And do you find that a lot of people use the Met 81st space as like sort of an entry point into the museum? Like, will they go from there and then into the institution?
Anecdotally, we have noticed that, but in this survey that I'm looking at, we're checking to see how many people are full-time visitors. Some people actually, I mean, it's funny to us because the way the space is contained in a way, so you come in through the education entrance and you encounter the space. So our whole operation about how we operate in that space has had to shift because we are the space in front of the studio is like a street now, and it's like a bakery. So you open out and you take out your sandwich board and you bring your thing and and then our store has sort of been more family friendly and shifted its merchandise to reflect what people may be interested to come to the store, and change its carpet and stuff like that. So it has become a bit of like a microcosm in the world. And sometimes people come in and they say, what else is there to do? And they're like, you can go to the museum. And they say, where?
It's so funny. It's amazing.
here. So we're
There's some
checking
stuff upstairs.
right here. So
You're
you
like-
can come there and not know that you're at the Met. And some people who are coming to us for the first time, they're coming to see a children's space. And they sort of entertain there and everything is going fine. And of course, we do give them a free pass if you want it. If you came from the studio, you get a pass to go see the museum. And we also have like a tool, a product that we use for people who are older, and by older we mean 8 to 11 or older, where you go through the Met. It's like a little kit with, again, tools, a magnifying glass and a light filters and things like that, so that you can go to the galleries and basically perform experiments with things that are in cases. And curatorial has been super helpful and great with us by lowering cases so kids can see, and they can sort of, take experiments and link to stuff with codes and stuff like that. So really, really interacting, but as a scientist, a person who is learning to look for materials that are there. That's helpful.
Yeah, no, and I think it's worth noting that, like, for a lot of people, like, a museum is not a welcoming place, like it can be really intimidating. So, I think just even having that place of orientation where you're like introduced to some things and, or just like a friendly greeting, it's like, you kind of like, it makes a big difference.
Definitely. So, I mean, and there are lots of little things that we've done too that are, in conjunction with visitor services and security. I mean, we have stroller parking, like designated lines on the ground.
Oh my God, that's important.
So you feel like you're comfortable. Like my stroller, I can put it. It's a big deal. It's, you know what I mean. So you could park wherever, but now it says stroller parking. So you come in and you come on in and you can park in a parking space. You know what I mean.
So I'm gonna make a plug for another book, Unreasonable Hospitality. Do you know about this one?
Say that again.
Unreasonable Hospitality.
Unreasonable Hospitality. I do not. I should.
So have you ever watched have you watched The Bear?
I have. I have watched one episode, but I don't have. Is it Hulu?
Yeah.
I don't have Hulu.
The second season, they're reading Unreasonable Hospitality, but it's written by one of the co-owner or the people that created 11 Madison Park.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of it talks about hospitality, or just like making people feel welcome, and like that, and like I just think there's, like hotels and restaurants, like they, or just like street vendor, like there's all these things that I wish museums would adopt, just make these things more welcoming. Anyway, I'm not going to keep monologuing. I'm gonna let people ask some questions. Matt Tarr from the American Museum of Natural History. Do you want to ask your question? Called you out. All right, Matt, do you want me to ask your question for you? Oh, no, there he is.
I'm here. Sorry, I'm outside at the across the park at the competition. I just wanted to say how much I really appreciate like the tenor of the way you talk, and like I really feel that passion, and like this is real work that we're doing. It's not just it's not just a job. It's really important stuff, but it's also fun. And anyway, I love your enthusiasm. But like to that end, like what's next for you? Like what can you do? Seems like a big success. It was a lot of work fighting the bureaucracy and getting something done that still looks like the idea that you had and that you pitched. So what's next, for you, and what's next for you in the Met? Like what's the big challenge that you're trying to sink your teeth into now?
The next big challenge, some of it is ongoing. I mean, my boss said to me, I want you to do what you did with the 81st Studio with all the programs. So like, for instance, so that's ongoing. How can we make our programming also interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary, and having people come from all over who wouldn't think normally to come here? So it means monks chanting in the gallery sometimes, and really sort of thinking out of the box about does that mean, or having curators also have conversations with conservators, or have a living artist come and talk about something, rather, or the guy who did the painting. That's the person I want to hear from. You know what I mean? You know what it takes to paint a gallery? It's a lot of work, and it's very carefully done. I think the public wants to know that. So things like that. And then I would say, what else are we doing? Community engagement is a big thing. We just had the Harlem Renaissance show close, so there was a major kind of model we tried out with that. So that'll be the next thing. And we are looking, it's top secret at the moment. We're in early sort of conceptual stages for something. And we would probably have a sort of a launch. So probably another 2 to 3 year project to get something where we about learning, and my goal often is to reshape. If you do something, this is a big platform. How can you reshape the field? you know, which is always easy to do. So that's what we're hoping. That's what's next.
So I'm gonna ask one question because I know a lot of people here come from museums. They're in museums, like they're within these, you know, beautiful bureaucracies that we love. And you know, like, and you, in some ways, you know, like, how do you create a like a little revolution in your museum, or like how do you move them towards, you know, yeah, or I don't know, or evolution, or you know, how do you move them towards towards embracing new ways of engaging with audiences?
I mean, it's hard. I mean, it has to start at the top. The person at the top has to be open-minded enough and to trust you to do something. And I realized that after that, you really need to have this trust. And with that, in a place like the Met, I would say specifically demonstrating success. So what we do is executive buying is really super important. And not everyone on the team. Max very much is the content guy. So I was brought in, I'm a content person. And to be able to creating smaller spaces. So, because it's not just this, it's like, say, like the music program, creating a smaller space where risks can be taken. And
Yeah.
you make a pilot or you do a thing and let that be successful. So it's a lot of it is demonstrating. So sometimes I'm just being likable and being a lot of gratitude, radical hospitality, really being very, you know what I mean? Very thankful, very grateful, making sure that people feel heard, making sure it's a lot of emotional work, you know what I mean? And it's tough. I'm a woman in a space like this, so it's a lot of emotional work that you have to do. But I think it does start with leadership, having a person say yes and trust you to do that. And a lot of what we were doing was very different for the institution, even different for Blue Cadet, the way of working, different for the architect, who's a way of working, which again, you're not it's not legible to me how I'm working. And people tell me this after the fact. So it sounds like I knew, oh yeah, that's my style. I did not know that. I was just like, you know what I mean? This is how it has to go if we want this idea to get to the finish line in the way we perceived it and not get lost. Because the more cooks you start out making a soup, and next thing you know, it's a souffle, and you're like, shit, that's not what we said we would make. You know what I mean? And he's like, it kind of looks like a soup, I guess, you know? So it's, yeah, so I think a lot of it, I'm not one to talk. I mean, the Met is special, the timing and everything, all the planets were in alignment, all the kind of stuff with Max, with the pandemic, so many things. But even, so now I have a reputation to be an innovative person. You know what I mean? Because I've sort of proven it. So you get to do that. So, and you bring people around you who are also dreamers. That's what I call the people in my department. You hire people who can dream. I hire a DJ. That was one of their jobs. A person who works as a DJ late at night and does their job in this museum. Like that's the only person who can think. I mean, there is no box. Forget out of the box. There's no box. They just and not know what the Met has done in the past, and that's wonderful. Traditions are amazing, and sometimes it's a teeny tweak. Not so for instance, teeny tweaks. Let me give you, like, in terms of small revolutions, we've had the program called the Met Copies program, traditional program where artists, I was a painter, you go and you copy a great work. So people would come in the galleries and you would set up your easel with your canvas on the ground and you would copy in the galleries. This has been on for more than 100 years probably. So my small tweak was, can we have team copy? Can we have a team copies program? What did I do? All I said, change the audience, which is radical and amazing and wonderful. And these are teenagers from New York City public school system who come in here and are copying masterworks. Now remember also, I'm also talking to the people in European paintings who have to give permission. So what did we do? So the adults they don't need a chaperone, but the kids do. Someone who's going to be there with them. And the kids actually are faster than the adults. I mean, they finish their work quicker. They're like chill. They're like, so we have a teen copies program. And I asked, marketing did some B-roll footage. So we're going to do like a little documentary of this young person at some point. So one teeny thing, and it appears radical. In a lot of ways it is. And it hits a lot of boxes. A lot of kids are from Title I. You know what I mean? They're in the school. I mean, so that's a very teeny thing that's revolutionary in what it's able to do, and its impact, most importantly, not for the sake of it, but something that will impact the lives of these 18 young people who come and are copying masterworks in the galleries of the Met
I love it. I
on
love
a,
it.
you know what I mean?
I love it. I love it. Well, there's like, I mean, there's just like such amazing sort of themes throughout this talk. I mean, I know we could keep going on. We're kind of at time right now, but I just like personally wanted to express my gratitude for this conversation and also for you for being like a real leader in the space and providing some trust for probably other organizations to take some risks and yeah, no, I think I find these talks just absolutely amazing and inspiring. Heidi, I don't know if you have any sort of like parting words to the community.
Yeah, I'm very grateful to be here, and I'm just excited that so many people showed up to hear about this. I'm very humbled by that. I just thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I love your questions. I really do appreciate it. Thank you so much. I do.
All right, fantastic. And then if anybody has any follow-up questions or probably wants a private tour of the Met First Street space or whatever,
we do that.
You can reach out to me. We'll figure out a way to, we can always try to figure out a way to make it happen. But Heidi, thanks again. Truly appreciate it.
Pleasure. Anytime. And come in anytime. We do this all the time. People come to visit from all over.
All right. I love it.
Thank you. Thank you, Josh.
All
Thanks,
right,
everyone.
thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye.